So the Samsung Galaxy S6 Edge is one of those phones that came out so many years ago, but it's funny because this particular device, in so many other ways, I will tell you for a lot of people, were probably very, very happy and ecstatic to buy a phone like this back in 2015 when this phone first came out. So when you're looking at a phone from back then and you're looking at phones now, clearly these phones are older, they don't have as much capability as before, and so many other things across the board. But I will tell you, for the average person out there, there probably is still a lot of capability for this particular device in some ways as a collector's item. Beyond that though, I would not really recommend buying this phone anymore. I'm going to be completely honest with you. But if you're in the market and you want to buy some phones that I would recommend buying this year, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, starting off with the outside of the Samsung Galaxy S6 Edge, this particular phone on the outside, on the front, had a 5.1-inch Super AMOLED display. It's a 1440p panel, and it was a really good panel at that time. I remember when this particular phone first came out, I was very, very happy about it. I thought, for the most part, Samsung did a really good job with this display, and Samsung did really good jobs with their displays their whole entire time they've made displays. That was one of the coolest things going on for their particular devices at that time, and I would definitely tell you this in and of itself is a very, very nice thing going on here. With the Samsung Galaxy S6 Edge, this display curved, and this was the first time they kind of threw in like this really big curved display on a phone. I think they had the Note Edge before this. I don't know, that was a specific time when Samsung was trying it, but this was at a bigger scale what they really tried. I think they did a pretty decent job with it. They since have put a lot of curved displays on a lot of their phones. I think all their phones have flat displays now. For quite a bit of time, there was a big change where Samsung was kind of throwing in these other types of displays with these curved sides to it. I do think the home button on the front has aged, and overall this phone has aged, kind of interestingly, because the massive amount of, bezels on it. But I will tell you, with the home button and everything, I think it was a very nice thing going on here for the most part, that it still looks good for a 2015 device. Like, this device is 9 years old now, which is pretty crazy to think. The rest of the body, though, was also a very big change from the previous generation. The Galaxy S5 was a phone that had a lot of removable, stuff that you can kind of mess with, but it was a cheap-feeling phone for the most part, pretty much built out of plastic. The Samsung Galaxy S6 Edge built out of aluminum and glass. Very big difference here, and this was a much better, more premium feeling phone than the Samsung Galaxy S5. With something like the Galaxy S6 Edge, you're getting this aluminum build all across the board, which was something that was very cool. And on top of that, with this particular device, you were also getting a phone that was still giving you a micro USB port, but they were still giving you a headphone jack too, but it did remove two things that the Galaxy S5 kind of had that a lot of people loved, and that was the removable battery, and that was expandable storage. This phone did not have any expandable storage, which is a very annoying thing, and this phone did not have a removable battery either, which was another very annoying thing. If you're going through and buying some sort of a device, and you're going to use it for quite a bit of time, having those two things is probably some of the best things, and they should have just removed one thing at a time. They shouldn't have removed all of them at the same time. I think that's why the Galaxy S6 Edge and the Galaxy S6 kind of had this weird, kind of stereotype with it, and it's aged kind of weirdly because of that. But beyond that, what are you going to do? There's not much you can do about it at this point. But that was just another very big thing going on here. Single camera setup on the outside, glass back. And overall, I like the way this particular phone felt. I like the way this particular phone holds up. Again, there's not a lot to, things to complain about here, but I will tell you from those two things, for this old of a phone, those are the main things I kind of saw on the outside. From the price tag side, this phone, as you can probably tell, it is, it's not the, cheapest phone of all time when it first came out, but it is also not the most expensive phone anymore. This phone is a very, very cheap, old phone, as you probably would have expected, but there's a lot of other things that are just going on with this particular device that can end up having some issues here for the most part as well, and that's why I look at this particular phone, and I probably would recommend the average person to avoid it. It just doesn't make any sense to go and buy it for the most part. So from that particular perspective, that kind of covers it up there as well. Now in terms of the camera side of things, this particular phone on the back side is giving you a 16 megapixel wide angle lens. On the front side, it's giving you a 5 megapixel standard wide camera. Now you can do 4K at 30 on the back, and you can do 1440p on the front. And I will tell you, for the most part, this particular camera really isn't that great anymore. At that time though, it was actually very good, but in this day and age, it really is not that great of a camera, as you probably could suspect. It's a very aged, device, as you can probably see, and that is just kind of what happens when you're getting these types of older phones. You're just going to be getting phones and devices that are just going to be a little bit outdated when it comes down to it. I don't necessarily think that's a terrible or a bad thing, but that's just kind of what ends up happening when you're getting these types of phones. So that right there is kind of one big thing to keep in mind, that if you're getting this type of device, you're just going to have to kind of experience that for the most part at a kind of smaller scale, on a smaller level, as far as we can tell. But inside of social media apps and everything, at that time, it probably was okay. Nowadays, as you probably would have expected, it's really not that great. And once again, that is kind of the issue that you're getting here. Now, once again, I would hate for you to go and buy this phone and already have an outdated phone that you're not really going to rock with that much. And I don't want that to happen to you. So just keep that in mind with this particular device when it comes down to it as well. So from that side, that kind of covers it up there. From the software side, this is another big thing. Like, this phone has not gotten a software update in a very, very long amount of time. And that is one of the big things that I look at here. And that's why I look at this phone. And I probably, once again, would not recommend the average person to go ahead and buy a phone like this. When you're getting a device, you probably want it to have, some software updates and some future ahead of it. And once again, as I mentioned before, that's not really what's going on here. You're getting a device that is going to be giving you a very, very rocky type of experience for the most part. And as I said before, I just don't really want that to happen to you. I want you to be able to buy and have a phone that's going to be giving you a future ahead of it, so to speak. So that's exactly what's going on here. And when I look at this particular phone, that's primarily how I feel. I look at phones like the Samsung Galaxy S6 Edge, the Galaxy S5, the Galaxy S7, even the Galaxy S8. Those phones are just so outdated, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to go ahead and buy it, because their software is so outdated. So even the phone, if the phone had the craziest amount of features, maybe as a standard type of device, like a small one maybe, like a thing just kind of mess around with here and there. But for an actual phone you're using every day, you need a good secure phone to kind of mess with. And this is just not one of those types of devices that I would look at and recommend to the average person. So that right there's another very, very big thing to kind of keep in mind there as well. On top of that, with this particular phone, still is a very, interesting phone in terms of performance. So as you probably would have expected when it first came out, and even now to this day, it still has the same chipset, nothing changed there. It has that Exynos 7420 octa chipset with 3 gigabytes of RAM. The thing you have to remember once again with this particular phone from that RAM perspective is that 3 gigabytes of RAM it was very good back in 2015. And 2024, that is a very low amount of RAM to have. I think even the Samsung Galaxy A15 has more RAM than that. So there's absolutely no reason to buy a phone like this when the RAM is just the whole thing is so outdated, That's primarily how I feel in this particular standpoint. And that's when I'm looking at this particular device, I would just hate for you to go and buy a phone like this if it's already going to be in this particular situation. So that right there is another, somewhat, big thing to kind of keep in mind. And like I said, if you're going through buying a phone that has, if you're looking at the performance side, I would just avoid buying a phone like this because you're just going to run into too many problems from that particular perspective. So to kind of sum it up, what I would definitely tell you, there really isn't a big point of going through and buying this phone anymore. There are significantly better phones that I'd recommend the average person to buy than this thing. With this particular phone, you are much better off buying devices that are still supported with software and that still have futures ahead of it rather than this thing. I look at this particular phone and it just doesn't make any sense to go and buy a phone like this at all. You are much better off purchasing phones that are still supported, that still have futures ahead of them and still have a lot of power built in as well. And that is exactly how I feel about this particular phone when it kind of comes down to it. So keep that in mind, but that's kind of how I see this particular phone holding up in 2024. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.